This week on Things That Make Us Read, we have once again Brian, Sydney, and myself, Ulysses, talking about The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan. It is the unluckiest day of all time. It is 13/13/13. I'm a little bit afraid. How about you two?
Since when is it 13?
I ain't afraid of the number. This week we're talking about a science book for a change. We're discussing the OMNOMNomnivore's Dilemma as promised, as something to rinse the taste of the previous week's discussion of 50 Shades of Grey out of our mouths and minds. The Dilemma is Pollan's journey to food enlightenment on which he takes us along with.
In the book, Pollan attempts to trace food all the way back to the ground, to its roots, and find out how food is grown, processed, and brought to the consumer.
We decided the purpose of sharing his food journey with us is to inform people of the process that food goes through in each food chain that he discusses, and to also offer a solution to our national eating disorder, as he puts it. The eating disorder is that due to the fact that America is a mixing pot of cultures, there are a lot of options, so many in fact that we don't know what to eat, and we are not limiting ourselves.
I don't think I can say enough about how grateful I am for having his purpose that out there and that clear. I remember with Sedaris 2 weeks ago, his purpose was confuddled. It didn't even come until the end, if you can call that a purpose. This time, the purpose was delivered to us on the silver platter of introductions. From the start, Pollan makes it clear that the book was a long and fairly involved answer to this seemingly simple question from page 1.
As always, we'll start by talking about our opinions on the book. I don't think we're differing too much this time. We all read this book a couple years ago in our biology class, but that was a different version.
I was pretty pleasantly surprised when this book came up in our to-read list. We have a rather strict policy against rereading because sometimes you read a book in the past, you have a different version of it in your head, and you might glorify it, and it's just better if you have a fresh start each time. After quite some discussion, we decided that they were two different versions and that they were different enough, they counted as two separate books, and we were in the clear. I'll talk about the difference between the two later. What did you guys think?
I liked it, mostly because it took this esoteric, complicated topic about food science and agriculture and made it understandable to people who have no knowledge beyond high school biology.
I agree with Brian. This is that point I liked about his book, and another reason was the way he helps the reader understand each food chain or each process for the production of food, which helps the reader a lot, and it's very good organization.
I've always liked the book. It's rather informative, and sometimes Pollan's writing style just makes me really giddy because it's really good overall. He has a rather strong and prominent voice that feels very casual despite the topic that he picked to talk about, which makes this book worth reading. Now, some might comment on how this video is shorter than our previous two, but there's a good reason for that. When You Are Engulfed in Flames by David Sedaris was a rambling, wandering book that lacked direction and a clear purpose. It was like looking at a collection of short stories by the same author written at different points in their lives. But due to the lack of connection in the writing, there was a lot of different elements employed, which means we had a lot of different things to talk about. 50 Shades of Grey was a longer video because the writing isn't very good at all and requires us to talk about every single little thing that went wrong, which was a lot. Michael Pollan has destination, direction, and is deliberate in his writing, building up to a point, the perfect meal. This isn't a bad thing, seeing as he makes his points extremely well. It's less about the amount of techniques you use, and more about how you use them and how well you use them.
In the book, Pollan constantly uses weaving. His weaving is one of the things that keeps this book from becoming a textbook. Using the weaving, he can state history, facts, and any background information necessary without losing the reader. In the third chapter of the first section, Corn, he talks about the corn elevator and how the elevator would overflow. Here's a quote. If they saw dry grains of maize scattered on the ground, they quickly gathered them up, saying, Our sustenance suffereth, it lieth weeping. If we should not gather up, it would accuse us before our Lord, it would say. O our Lord, this vassal pick me not up when I lay scattered upon the ground. Punish him, or perhaps we should starve. The quote talks about how the Aztecs felt about corn. This is one of the ways he used weaving. Using the quote, he not only conveys the point that the Aztecs basically worshipped corn, but does it in such a way that is memorable and more easily understood for the reader. He does this for every chapter, which really helps and is why weaving is so effective and such a helpful writing technique that he uses.
Another Another thing that keeps a book from being a textbook, but still staying informative, as one is the narrative of his investigation. He connects his experiences to the facts and is able to smoothly move from the story of his personal experiences to the pieces of history and science that let the reader understand the significance of his experience. He does this to make people understand the history and science without distracting from the narrative and actually adding on to give it more meaning.
Now, the challenge that comes with science books is that because of your level of your knowledge, there's a good chance one won't understand what it's about. This fear of a lack of comprehension is what keeps most people from reading science books. Assuming Pollan knew this when writing his book, he made sure to kind of translate what he's saying at the end of making his sciencey claim to support. One of the first things you need to consider as a writer is your audience. Referring back to what we said earlier about Pollan and his purpose, he wants to inform, not these scientists and food-savvy people who probably know everything about what he's saying already, but to educate the normal people, the ones that buy into the propaganda and the crazy diets out there. This is also important because of the sciencey parts take up a lot, if not the entire book, and he uses those bits to prove his point. Without them and without the reader comprehension of it, all is lost. The most important component of a piece is so that your reader can read it. You have to be conscious of who your audience is, and the translation is the consideration of them. After giving his claim about how crazy diets are affecting our countries and who suffers from it, he summarizes why it's such a bad thing using frank and familiar language with a touch of humor. This goes on later in the book. This is a major element of Pollan's writing, and as such is the reason the book is so successful at its goal. Pollan makes sure to explain the concepts rather than just throwing them at the reader. This is best seen in a simplified version of it, where there are graphs, diagrams, and pictures helping translate what the text means in shorter sections within the sections. Both of these aspects work to alleviate the short human attention span and to further the understanding of the text. Referring to the quote on page 3, the blamelessness of steak and starch, two of the most wholesome and uncontroversial foods known to man, bread and pasta, acquired a moral state that promptly bankrupted dozens of bakeries and noodle firms and ruined an untold number of perfectly good meals. This is just great writing. After giving his support of how crazy diets are affecting our country and the process of who suffers from it, he makes his claim and puts into layman terms why things are so bad and why we should feel in the manner that we can clearly understand.
Omnivore's dilemma is broken into 3 sections: the industrial, pastoral, and personal. Each of the 3 sections explores a different method of how food is produced, and as the book progresses, the process that the food undergoes gets shorter and shorter until you get to the personal food chain, which is pretty much just living a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, and this is the food chain that Pollan suggests results in the perfect meal. This is used as build-up and support to the claim he makes near the end, which the meal made by the hunter-gatherer's lifestyle is perfect. He describes the other production methods and points out their flaws, and he uses that to show how his view is valid. I found it comparable to the way Goldilocks went about the 3 bears' house and tried each bowl of porridge until she found the perfect bowl. If the sections were in a different order, the reader might say that his viewpoint wasn't supported.
The organization is also useful to help the reader clearly separate the process. Sometimes when reading, chapters have a tendency to kind of blur together and the information becomes indistinguishable from each other. Having separate title cards and the sections within the sections helps clear your mind just enough but still retain the information you learned before, like a food taste tester. Food taste testers try a bunch of different foods, but to keep the palate clear of the different foods, they usually have to rinse their mouth out with something. Not something enough to take it off their mind completely, but something enough so they can distinguish what ice cream tastes best, for example.
Pollan could have had the personal food chain first, and the reader could have been, okay, I don't think your view is valid. What's wrong with the food at Whole Foods or even Burger King? I like Burger King. They have 50-cent ice cream cones now. The organization makes it so that the reader is prepared to hear his opinion at the end, which may be controversial because not many people live a hunter-gatherer's lifestyle, and they may not take it lightly that their way of eating and living is being put down. It keeps the reader reading and makes him see why he thinks the way he does.
That's all we wanted to talk about this time. I think perfectly timed, I hope. Ulysses, tell us what we're going to be talking about next week.
Okay, we have magic hat.
We're going to switch things up. Instead of just randomly picking, we're going to get like a magic hat, We're going to put all the books in the hat, pull it out. So, Brian, would you like to do the honors?
Sure.
Wait, what does that say? Twilight.
Twilight?
Why does it say Twilight?
Oh, okay.
Wait, let me see.
Hold on.
Wait, no, wait. They all say Twilight?
Twilight.
Wait. Why? Who would put them all Twilight? Wait.
Twilight?
I don't understand. Wait. This one says Harry Potter. No, why don't we get the Harry Potter one? We're gonna have to get rid of the person who chooses stuff. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Thanks for watching, guys. Good night.